You spend decades trading your time, energy, and physical labor to accumulate a real portfolio. Capital, real estate, equity. The instinct is to pass that wealth directly down to your children through a standard will. But institutional lawyers watch what happens next every single day. Your capital hits probate court, a sluggish, highly public legal pipeline where administrative fees and mandatory audits drain the momentum from your life's work. The risks multiply if your heirs are young. Imagine a single parent managing a multi-million-dollar estate, suddenly disappearing and leaving it all to an 8-year-old child. An 8-year-old cannot legally hold a real estate deed or command corporate stock. State systems instantly step in, freezing the capital under a clunky guardianship court and exposing those assets to predatory guardian fees. Elite wealth allocators do not rely on standard wills. They insulate their estates and bypass the probate courts by deploying a resilient structural vehicle, a trust. To build this vault, you have to embrace a legal paradox. A trust is an abstract binding contract where you deliberately transfer ownership of your assets so that on paper, you no longer own them. The trust does. The architecture uses 3 roles. First, the grantor creates the vault, injects assets, and writes the rules. You appoint a trustee, bound by fiduciary duty, to manage the estate. Finally, the beneficiary receives the metered flow of resources from the assets inside. Because an independent corporate entity actively manages the contents, your physical death does not trigger a legal freeze or an estate battle. The capital continues to flow to the beneficiary according to the script. The legal universe categorizes these structures based on 2 primary variables, control and pacing. Under the parameter of control, we find the critical dividing line. A revocable trust is a highly flexible, fluid structure. As the grantor, you retain the absolute right to alter the rules, extract cash, or dissolve the entire entity at any moment. Conversely, an irrevocable trust is an entirely different financial weapon. Once you execute it, the deployment is completely permanent. You surrender your personal ownership rights and the ability to alter the document. In exchange for giving up that control, you legally disconnect the assets from your individual liability profile. Under the parameter of pacing, a living trust is fully established and activated while the grantor is actively alive. You continuously use the assets during your lifetime, and upon your death, the estate completely bypasses probate court. A testamentary trust, on the other hand, is a sleeping entity created explicitly inside a traditional will document. It only activates after your death is validated. Because it is birthed from a will, your entire estate is still forced through the public, high-cost pipeline of probate before a single asset is protected. By deliberately tuning these parameters, a wealth builder dictates exactly how rigid their vault becomes and precisely when the defensive walls go live. Let's run this architecture against aggressive real-world threats. First, youthful irresponsibility. A trust allows you to install time locks, legally forcing the trustee to meter out capital strictly for education and living expenses until your heir hits a mature age. Second, aggressive lawsuits. If an adult beneficiary faces commercial litigation or racks up toxic liabilities, an irrevocable trust provides absolute asset protection. Creditors can strike the perimeter, but they cannot reach the assets inside. The legal reality is simple. Creditors cannot seize a family home to settle the beneficiary's debt, because the beneficiary does not own it. The trust does. Third is tax optimization. By strategically allocating assets into an irrevocable trust while you are alive, you effectively shrink your individual taxable estate down to 0, neutralizing predatory estate taxes. Fourth, protecting beneficiaries with special needs. Major state-funded medical assistance programs like Medicaid require individuals to maintain extremely low personal wealth. Holding capital independently inside a specialized trust funds their premium care without disqualifying them from their core government benefits. Fifth, the divorce firewall. By placing valuable family assets into a trust before entering a marriage contract, you effectively insulate that capital. During an intense property division, a divorce court cannot split an asset you never officially owned as an individual. These pillars integrate into a comprehensive defense strategy. The trust architecture provides a direct structural response to each of these major systemic vulnerabilities. Deploying this level of defense requires acknowledging the structural costs. Establishing a trust requires upfront capital for specialized attorneys, and elite corporate trustees typically command an annual management fee scaling between 1 to 2